Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. This week, we're kicking off another one of our themed months, Scary Parents, or, as Travis has coined it,
Scarence.
And we're kicking it off with Serial Mom, the John Waters. I think it's fair at this point to call it a classic, but maybe we'll debate about that. Before we get into Serial Mom, just a couple calls to action this week. We have a new extended currently consuming episode available at patreon.com/genrevision for all our lovely Patreon subscribers. Whoo boy, that was a lengthy one.
It was. Extended is definitely the correct word for it. But that's the kind of stuff you get when you sign up to be a premium subscriber at patreon.com/genrevision.
And we covered quite a few recent films like Spider-Man Far From Home, Hellboy 2019, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're interested in that, go check it out at patreon.com/genrevision. Become a subscriber for just $5 a month. And you get access to not only that, but all the extra content for all the Genre Vision network shows. And last little call to action is you should go to genrevision.com and check out our schedule page because we're pretty full up, I think, almost through November.
Yeah, I think we have every week but Halloween and October set. And then November is actually going to be kind of packed, and that will go up pretty soon. If you want to be the first ones to know what the schedule is going to be like for the rest of the year, go to genrevision.com, click on the schedule link, and it's right there.
All right. So this is, I think, a momentous and joyous occasion for Genre Vision in that we are covering, as a main topic, our first John Waters film.
Definitely a cause for celebration, I think.
I don't know if John Waters needs an introduction at this point, but at one point, William S. Burroughs deemed him the Pope of Trash, which is a beautiful title. John Waters is a provocateur. He's made, I think, a very limited amount of movies. I want to say he's made maybe just like 10 movies.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't made a whole ton of movies, but he does have, an underground sort of outsider art output before he started making feature-length films that you can get your hands on. I think some of his shorts are included on maybe some of his Criterion releases.
Yeah, like Multiple Maniacs.
Yeah. So John Waters does have this library of stuff to sink my teeth into, but he has sort of become a legend in Hollywood for somebody who can continue to make incredibly trashy movies and somehow not end up on the extreme fringe. Like, he's still an outsider artist, but he's also a popular figure.
He's incredibly celebrated, and it's clear, and we'll get to this, I think, in Serial Mom, that he is a talent that genuine stars, I mean, I don't know how loosely you want to define that, but real notable actors want to work with him. He made a movie that is responsible, I think, for kicking off Johnny Depp's career.
Yeah, Crybaby was definitely a big deal for Johnny Depp, that and 21 Jump Street. But yeah, John Waters does have the ability to cross over into mainstream art and make something that appeals. Probably the biggest thing he's had is Hairspray. He made the Hairspray movie, and then when it hit Broadway, I mean, that was a huge, huge explosion just in terms of people being aware of his output. And, I grew up hearing about Pink Flamingos as this, like, legendarily disgusting movie, and that was the thing that people talked about with John Waters. And then when Hairspray got popular on Broadway, and then they remade Hairspray as a movie, from the Broadway musical, Waters sort of entered the lexicon again as a popular filmmaker.
Well, and he's always been, I think, one of the standard bearers for what pop culture sees as camp. He's been very vocal and very prominent in terms of embodying a camp mentality. And obviously that's changed over the years as parody has become harder and harder to do. But all this is to say that John Waters is an incredibly important filmmaker. And one, I think it's fair to say that between Travis and I, we have an intermediate relationship with his film work.
If that. I mean, I really didn't have much of an education into what John Waters' filmography was really like until I saw Cecil B. Demented and several other things. I used to think it was very divine-centric, but that's not true at all.
So Serial Mom comes out in 94, and Waters' heyday was during the 70s and then into the 80s with Hairspray and polyester and stuff like that. And Serial Mom is, I would argue, this is probably the most commercial effort he ever made. I mean, he would tell you that everything he makes is commercial because he thinks anything he makes can be sold. But Serial Mom has very notable face-forward talent. It has wide-reaching comedic sense on the surface. Like, there's an easy way to buy into this on the surface, but the deeper you kind of dive into the insanity of Serial Mom, it's inescapably a John Waters affair.
Sure. I mean, John Waters knows what people like. They like movie stars, so you get Kathleen Turner in there. He knows they like profanity. He knows they like sex. He knows they like violence. And this movie has all of those things, but he doesn't portray any of these things in any sort of usual way. I mean, he has his distinct spin on it. Immediately when the film starts, after the really fun opening credits with Basil Polidoris' score, fucking Basil Polidoris has a score in this movie. Holy shit.
It's such a I love the main theme of this movie.
That's not the only good part. I mean, literally all the music is awesome in the film.
It is. And I mean, if you only know Basil Polidoris for these super manly, Conan the Barbarian and Starship Troopers and RoboCop, it's like, oh my gosh, please listen to his Serial Mom score.
Yeah, it's very lush, and then at times has like a Bernard Herrmann thing going on. But immediately after those opening credits, we meet the central family of Serial Mom, this family called the Sutphins. Beverly Sutphin, the matriarch of the family, is played by Kathleen Turner. Her husband is played by Sam Waterston, and then their kids are played by Ricky Lake and Matthew Lillard, who I think is in his first film role here.
Well, you talk about the opening credit. We have to talk about that John Waters predated the Coen brothers doing the whole riff on a true story.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, this does predate Fargo in that the film opens up basically with a fake disclaimer that says, this film is a true story. The screenplay is based on court testimony, sworn declarations, and hundreds of interviews conducted by filmmakers. Some of the innocent characters' names have been changed in the interest of a larger truth. No one involved in the crimes received any sort of financial compensation, which is the funniest part of that.
Well, my favorite line is some of the innocent characters' names have been changed in the interest of a larger truth.
Right, which is very, very nose in the air, pretentious about sort of documentary filmmaking.
It's so, I love that line, and it sets up. It's like, oh, okay, this is already playing, and John Waters will tell you that each of his movies he felt that he was spoofing a specific genre, and with Serial Mom, he was really spoofing what was more popular as TV movies of these, lurid true crime affairs.
Right.
And so, we know it's like, okay, this is total BS, and it's great that he's buying into the gag. And again, it's 2 years before Fargo, so hey.
Well, and as you're watching this opening credits, you see Patricia Hearst in the credits. You're like, fucking Patty Hearst is in this? So he already knows he's playing with this idea of like popular true crime, because Patty Hearst was the center of a popular true crime story.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the credits, the "and" credit goes to Suzanne Summers, who will later show up as herself, playing the role of Beverly Sutphin in the eventual movie that they're making. But I have to say, this opening sequence sets up the family perfectly. We understand the dynamic and the characters immediately. It is so economic and still really funny. This entire opening has Beverly kind of freaking out over a fly that's in the room as she's serving breakfast. And we can already tell it's like, okay, she's kind of got a screw loose because she can't stop fixating on this fly. And when she finally smacks the fly with a fly swatter and we get a gross close-up of its just splattered remains, we get the written and directed by John Waters credit.
Yeah, it's a great sequence. This is also our first very direct indication that not only does she have a screw loose, she probably just straight up kills people, as indicated also by the title Serial Mom. I think they're talking about some sort of lurid thing that happened in the news where some guy killed a bunch of people, and her kids go, he killed people, Mom. And then she's very distracted by the fly, and she goes, we all have our bad days.
Well, and of course, we should set up that Sam Waterston has a couple lines about, he's very pro death penalty.
Yep.
And well, we then learn that there's been harassment of another woman in the neighborhood, Dottie, and who's played by the wonderful Mink Stoll.
Mm-hmm.
And these cops come over to the Sutvens during their breakfast. They're like, yeah, we're, canvassing the area, and we're asking about, if who could be doing the, harassing this woman. And they they give her a letter, and they're like, we just have to warn you. This was a letter that was sent to her. We have to warn you. There is some language. And they open it up, and it's just, ransom note cut out with magazine stuff, and it just says, I'll get you, pussy face.
Oh, the timing of this reveal, cutting to the close-up of the letter that just says, I'll get you, pussy face, is so well done. But I mean, even before they get up to that, there's this like little progression of quirky things about Beverly that just sort of catch you off guard. Like earlier, I think she tells Matthew Lillard's character to spit out his gum, and he's like, but Mom, it's sugar-free. And then when the cops show up, one of them is chewing gum, and she says, we don't allow gum in this house. She makes the cop spit his gum out.
We should just say this right up front. This is a role Kathleen Turner was born to play, because when she's able to switch on the perfect, Beaver Cleaver's mom sweetness and smile, and then immediately turn into this very stern-faced, threatening person. It is a tour de force of a performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of Leave It to Beaver. It's also a little bit sort of David Lynch Lumberton, from Blue Velvet sort of stuff. Even when she starts talking about how the songbirds make her feel, and she starts imitating the songbird song, and she's going, ooh-wee, ooh-wee.
Well, she's saying to like the police officers, she's like, I just believe that there's so much beauty and good in the world. Like, look at those birds out there. Can't you hear them? Ooh-wee, ooh-wee. It's so funny.
Well, when you realize her commitment, or like the level of commitment she has to this performance, you think this is going to be good. It bodes very, very well for the rest of the film when you think Kathleen Turner is the protagonist of this movie, and she's already not only swinging for the fences, but hitting every single pitch that's thrown to her. So all of this takes place in natural John Waters fashion in the suburbs outside of Baltimore. And of course, these are the perfect suburbs. There's really, no indication, unlike in David Lynch's Lumberton, which has the close up of the grass that eventually zooms in, and you see like the roiling bugs underneath the grass that tell you something is wrong. There's really nothing like that here. The biggest indication that something is wrong is that Beverly Sutphen doesn't quite seem normal.
Well, here's the thing though. Beverly Sutphen is not only our protagonist, I think John Waters totally sees her as the hero, because the people the reason that she kills people is that they do things that really annoy her. And they're annoyances that, for the most part, we pretty much agree with.
Right. There are some sort of surface annoyances, like, her distaste for gum and things like that are just sort of identifiable as like, oh yeah, moms, they're kind of like that. But then there are some that we absolutely agree with. You're like, yeah, fuck that. Fuck that person. They deserve to get run over, or they deserve to get stabbed to death, or whatever happens to these horrible people.
Running over the teacher, which you're talking about, is I'm 100% like as a movie character, not in real life, obviously, but she goes and she's having parent-teacher meetings, and she's talking about her son, played by Matthew Lillard, and the teacher's like, yeah, his grades are good and everything, and he's doing very well, but he's so obsessed with horror movies. And look, he drew this horrible picture, which is a poster of Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast, which I'm gonna get back to because there's a great moment with that. And she's like, oh, come on. It's just, silly stuff. It's nothing to be worried about. So I love that this idyllic postcard mom character isn't hung up about horror movies.
Right. She's not hung up on the idea of violence, which is, again, a more commentary from Waters, where he talks about, we want to hide our children from sex. We think sex is the thing that we have to censor the most in media, whereas like violence is, of course, widely available for children to see, even in cartoons. And so there's a little bit of commentary about that. But also the teacher directly judges Beverly Sutphen when he says, well, if if your son likes all these things and is drawing these kinds of pictures, you're doing something wrong.
And that signs his death warrant. So, of course, after she runs him over, and to just add another reason why he should get killed, when she sees him in the parking lot, he pops a stick of gum in his mouth.
Oh yeah, and of course that's the cardinal sin is gum chewing.
Well, that's the button on the gag of his death. They pan down and he's bleeding out of his mouth, and the gum spits out of his
mouth. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful stuff. I love Waters' little details like that. Beverly is not only sort of a moral killer, like she has sort of a moral or a guide of like etiquette that if people violate it, she'll kill them. It's not unlike Hannibal Lecter in that way.
Yeah.
But she's also sort of an agent of chaos. Like there's, Mink Stoll's character, Dottie Henkel. Beverly just loves to fuck with Dottie Henkel.
Well, but there's a reason. It's not out of nowhere. It's because we get a flashback of Dottie stealing her parking space at the grocery store.
Right. But her endless torment of Dottie Henkel is like nothing short of cruel, but it's also outright hilarious. Of course, she's the one who wrote the ransom note that says, "I'll get you, pussy face." But in a few scenes later, she just does a straight up prank call to Dottie Henkel's house. And she starts the prank call by going, "Is this the cocksucker residence?"
Turner's delivery of this whole scene, it's masterful in the realms of comedy.
When she says, "Is this the cocksucker residence?" I had to pause the movie. I was laughing too hard and too long, and I missed a bunch of stuff. And the rest of the scene is just as fucking funny.
Oh, God. Well, because she switches gears and she pretends to be like, we're calling to try and get this person that's been harassing you, but we need to hear the exact language.
Right. She's trying to make Dottie Henkel swear.
And Mink Stoll, oh my God, Mink Stoll is just so good. So yeah, her son, I think her son's name's Chip.
It sounds right.
Okay. Matthew Lillard.
Yeah.
She comes in and he's watching, him and his friends are watching Blood Feast. He works at a video store, which made me super nostalgic.
That's John Waters' neighborhood video store.
Yes, that's beautiful. So they're watching Blood Feast, and of course, like it's the famous tongue scene from Blood Feast, which if you don't know, please watch Blood Feast. And she comes in and they're watching it, and the one friend played by Justin Whalen of Child's Play 3 it's so revolting that he has to go throw up in the bathroom, and Beverly's just like, "Oh, you kids," and everything. And then she asks to rewind and watch the scene with them. And this is one of my favorite cuts in the movie, is we are just watching Blood Feast on the screen. And it's this horrible, gory sheep's tongue that the villain of Blood Feast is pulling out. It's a close-up. And we cut to an extreme close-up of just this red meatloaf. Oh, I love that cut so much.
John Waters is so playful. And that really is one of my favorite aspects of his style, is that he is so inventive with imagery. I mean, his earlier films, when he was just kind of, letting scenes play out almost in like a stagey fashion, just because he didn't have a whole lot of film and didn't have a whole lot of cameras and resources to make it happen. But like as soon as he was able to evolve and, put together more expensive productions, it's clear that he had such a developed sense of visual language. And Serial Mom is super polished in that regard.
Oh, amazingly so. This is a gorgeously, knowingly pastel movie. Like I've never found an aesthetic that I find in real life kind of repulsive to be so enchanting.
Yeah, he absolutely wants to make the suburbs look as idyllic as possible, and he does so. Like it's, his implication is that the suburbs of course are terrible, but he really makes it about the people. He makes it about the behavior. As a location, though, he wants to really glorify and sort of paint a sort of Norman Rockwell style painting of them.
Well, oh, for sure. And I think that, like you're saying, it's all about behavior, to the point where Beverly's other neighbor, she doesn't recycle, and she just, tosses all her garbage out everywhere. And Beverly has this wonderful conversation with the garbage men, and the garbage men are totally on her side. They're like, do you know how much taxpayers spent on having to do and she's just sitting there throwing it all out. Like, I wish someone would kill her. and at the time it's like, yeah, this is funny, but Waters is a smart writer, because he's like, you're going to remember these guys, you're going to remember this scene, and I'm going to pay it off later in the movie.
Right. Well, she actually gives the two garbage men each like a little airplane bottle of booze. And this sort of calls back to earlier in the film when she runs over Mr. Stubbins, the math teacher. The only eyewitness to the crime was this girl smoking a joint. And Beverly sees the girl smoking a joint. And so she knows that the witness to the crime is now an unreliable witness. And something that if it were to come back, and haunt her, she'd be able to say, well, this person was smoking pot. They don't know anything.
But what's great is I think Beverly, even more so than that, I think she kind of relates the most to the garbage men in the movie, because that's kind of how she views herself. Like, she is taking out the human garbage of the world. Later, when we get to the trial scene, the garbage men aren't, called as witnesses or anything. They're outright helping Beverly win her case and joyfully laughing about it in the courtroom.
Well, they like her. And in many ways, Beverly is, of course, the extremely likable suburban mom, trying to be as nice as she can be to people who she perceives are living life the right way and doing things for her. Like, she is, I think, motivated mostly by trying to be this impossible ideal of the good suburban mom. And of course, John Waters wants to make that idea very unattainable, and says, like, if you really wanted to do this, and if you really wanted to sort of compete in this fashion to be the most, the most and the best at something like this, you'd have to be pretty cutthroat at it. And in the case of Beverly Sutphin, she's quite literally a cutthroat.
But I do think we need to give a special commendation to, I think this is a across the board great cast.
Oh, no question.
Everybody's bringing A-game fun. I love when Beverly and her husband, played by Law and Order's Sam Waterston, who it's so great to see him playing this very tweedy dork of a husband. And when they have their sex scene, it is ridiculously funny, because Beverly initiates it. It's clear that she is the power in the relationship. Like, he may go to work and, make the money for the family, and she's the stay-at-home mom, but she runs that house, even in the bedroom.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's just so milk toasty and stuff like that, And honey, do you wanna? And
yeah.
When their foreplay is just so funny. Of course, he's not going to say, like, I want to fuck you so bad. He just says things like, you bring me such peace.
And of course, again, he's meek and mild and, very subservient to her in this scene. And when she's immediately on top, and she starts just going, oh, yeah.
In her, like, perfect Kathleen Turner voice, which I'm sure carries for miles like fucking church bells.
Well, and then they have that cut of them, and it's just like, it is so over exaggerated, the thrusting, where they're basically like jumping on each other.
They're bouncing and bouncing and bouncing on that bed like a trampoline. They probably smashed their pelvises together real hard.
It's so funny.
But it's one of the funniest sex scenes, I think, of any movie of the decade. Like, not even Austin Powers had sex scenes that funny, and that was a sex comedy.
It's so funny.
I mean, and the cutting to the kids' reactions that they can clearly hear it makes the scene even funnier.
Yeah, it's great. There's so many little things. There's so many little quotes. We could just, quote the dialogue of this movie. For example, like, I think it's Chip who at the table, Matthew Lillard, says shit, and Beverly just goes, I don't like the brown word.
Yeah. It's full of little stuff like that.
It's littered. It is a treasure trove of that kind of stuff. And I think you had even said to me, is Serial Mom one of the most quotable movies that nobody remembers or talks about? And I think you're right.
Yeah. I think this movie is criminally underappreciated. I really don't know why we're not talking about it quite as much. And it is one of Waters' more notable releases in that it had, a substantial budget and recognizable movie stars. Even things like, Cecil B. Demented had Melanie Griffith and Stephen Dorff and Maggie Gyllenhaal in it. But that was such a tiny, tiny, tiny little movie with no marketing behind it, really. But this was Serial Mom was a studio production. It was big.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this to you. This came out, I think, like a month before O.J. Simpson was arrested.
Yeah, just about.
And I feel like it just missed its window, because so much, like, if you didn't know when it was made, you would think this is clearly a post O.J. movie. Like it's talking about, especially in the third act when it becomes this, the courtroom section of the movie and the media and the entire pop culture response to like Serial Mom becomes a hero, and obviously Waters is very much commenting on that there was such a rise in true crime interest in the early 90s because court TV had started to kick off.
That, and he was referencing sort of bigger pop culture touchstones from the past, particularly like the Ted Bundy trial.
Sure, but that was even still relatively recent.
Yeah,
and at the time, I mean, John Waters himself, like. When Sam Waterston finds all of like her murder clippings and then she finds tapes from Ted Bundy in prison.
Oh my God. I laughed so fucking hard. And John Waters himself as the voice of Ted Bundy.
And he's saying something like, "Hey, Beverly.
Beverly, it's so lonely on death row."
Oh my God. It's so funny.
Well, the cops start looking into Beverly because, they're able to trace her car to the death of the math teacher, Mr. Stubbins. And so, even though she's able to sort of shrug that off, and the cops, of course, being doofuses in this movie, are like, okay, yeah, whatever. They continue looking into Beverly, and they find her book collection, which, of course, has a bunch of murder shit in it, Helter Skelter and so on. But that isn't really concrete, it just, builds this case slowly of, what is this woman really into? Then we get to the flea market scene.
Yeah, the flea market scene in which the daughter, played by Ricki Lake, who I don't know what the cultural knowledge of Ricki Lake is at this point. I mostly just knew her as a talk show host.
Sure, but like she was in Crybaby.
Of course, in Hairspray. Yeah. Ricki Lake is so goddamn funny in this movie.
She is. I mean, she's just another great piece of casting in this flick. Like this flick's just so well cast.
And in this flea market scene in which she's trying to sell a Pee Wee Herman doll, which is great. She sees the guy that stood her up. Can't remember what his name is.
Carl.
Yeah. Who we saw earlier in the movie, and he's already been kind of shitty and dismissive to her early on. And then we see him hanging out with none other than Tracy Lords, which, if you're going to see the guy that stood you up being with anybody, seeing him with Tracy Lords is just, that's salt on the wound.
One of my favorite lines in the movie is Tracy Lords and this guy walking around the flea market, and she sees the fucking collectibles and goes, "Ooh, Franklin Mint." And the weird motivation to get to the fucking flea market scene is that this brilliant moment between Beverly and her neighbor Rosemary and Mink Still's character Dottie Hinkle. They go over to Rosemary's house, and then while Rosemary isn't looking, Beverly looks across the table at Dottie Hinkle, grabs a Fabergé egg from the coffee table, smashes it to smithereens right in front of Dottie Hinkle's face, and then proceeds to blame the shattering on Dottie. And of course, Dottie is just horrified. So,
but the moment in that when Beverly looks over to some flowers and goes, "Are those pussy willows?" And Dottie, her eyes shoot up. She's like, "What did you say?" And Kathleen Turner leaning in to Mink Stole and just going, "Pussy willows, Dottie." Fucking kills me. It's so funny.
Kathleen Turner really is. She's not chewing the scenery.
No.
It's not like she's outperforming everybody else, but her character really is gloriously written, and I think Kathleen Turner reads every line at its sort of like optimal line reading. It really is one of the best women performances of that year, if not the early 90s overall.
I definitely think it's one of the best female comedy performances of the decade.
There's no question about that. Yeah, it's gotta be. And all the other women in the movie are great too. Ming Stola particularly as Dottie Henkel. It's just so good. Man. But yeah, when Beverly smashes that Fabergé egg that leads them to the flea market, they go to the flea market, they're trying to sell the Pee Wee Herman doll, and they see Carl. Beverly, who wants to kill Carl for breaking her daughter's heart, follows him into the men's room. And of course she wants to kill the guy, but there's a guy that she doesn't see who's hiding in the bathroom stall, writing graffiti on the fucking wall and peering through a glory hole. It's a John Waters movie. Of course there's a glory hole in the bathroom stall in the perfect suburbs. So she actually takes I think it's a fireplace poker that she had managed to find out on the sales floor at the flea market, and she stabs the guy in the back with it while he's peeing at the urinal. He falls face down into the urinal, which is one of those urinals that starts at the floor, and then she flushes his fucking head in the urinal, which is great.
Well, and there's the great gag of when she impales him, his like liver or something is stuck on the end.
Yeah, it looks like a liver.
Yeah, and she's like trying to pick it off. It's so great. So yeah, eventually it becomes apparent to Beverly's family and the police and everything that she is the one committing all these murders. And I think an important element of the movie, and I think this would break the movie if it was in it, is there is never an indication that Beverly would ever hurt her family.
Right. Yeah, they definitely wanted to make the point that Beverly is doing these things because she believes she has to be a great mother. This is, in some sense, like in John Waters' commentary, this is a social pressure upon people in the suburbs to compete in a way. And you yourself have kind of written about this as well, and that there is this bizarre competition in suburban neighborhoods about who can have the nicest lawn, who can have the best lawn decorations, and all this sort of silly bullshit. It's pretty clear Waters wanted to lampoon all this stuff in this movie, but that's not the only thing he's really lampooning. It's not a one-note satire. It's pretty thematically complex, but it's things that you see pop up in other Waters films, like he cannot stand pearl clutching. He cannot stand people who act horrified at certain things, whether it be profanity or sex or anything like that, because I think he believes that at its core, the act of that pearl clutching horror is an act of hypocrisy.
Absolutely. I think the biggest targets in John Waters' filmography, and especially in Serial Mom, are prudes and assholes.
Yes.
Like he cannot abide either of those two things.
Well, I mean, there's people who might have hangups about sex, and that he doesn't really judge people because of that. He judges people who judge others.
Yes, that would be an asshole.
Yeah, like
a combination of prude and asshole.
Sure.
And in Serial Mom, it's very clear that like even though there are characters who's like eventually the big turning point is Beverly chasing down one of Chip's friends, the one played by Justin Whalen, and her thing with him is that he never wears his seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's funny, and I'm like, yeah, you should wear your seatbelt, but that is like it's a kid, and it's not a murder-worthy offense in, I think, the language and the hero journey that we've been on with Beverly.
Right. Yeah. It gets to a point where Beverly's sort of mental state gets more and more deranged. And it's as the cops are sort of getting a little bit closer to her, and, she realizes that her time as the serial mom might be coming to a close. And she goes sort of off the deep end a bit. There is a scene where she murders somebody by bludgeoning them to death with a roast leg of lamb, because not only do they like Annie, but they refuse to rewind their rented copy of Annie from the video store.
Yeah, I don't know if it's ever directly said that she's killing him because she doesn't like Annie. That's clearly informed by her son's opinion and stuff.
Right, but it's directly implied in the subtext of the film.
Yeah, the subtext is saying that, but Beverly's direct reason for killing her, she states it right out after she beats her head, and she just goes, "Rewind!"
Mm-hmm.
There's another great moment where she's killing a that's so twisted to say. There's a great moment when she's killing these people. She's killing this older couple. I can't remember what the reason was right now.
It's Betty Sterner and her husband Ralph. She kills Betty with scissors, and she kills Ralph by dropping a window air conditioner on his head. But
I can't remember what their crimes were. But the thing is that
it's something relatively minor. But like the family believes that Beverly has raced off to kill Scotty.
Justin Whalen's character.
Yes. So Beverly is racing off to kill Scotty, who we see as masturbating to a Chesty Morgan movie.
Which is so innocent and sweet. Like it's
Is it though, Drew? But
it is. I mean, comparatively in the modern landscape of pornography, there's something like I don't. It's
quaint. I will definitely call it quaint.
Like I don't think John Waters is like, this is like, that's John Waters' view of wholesome, is like, yeah,
as far as pornography goes, probably, yeah, that's the closest that's going to get to wholesome. But while Scotty is beaten off to this Chesty Morgan movie, we of course are under the impression that Beverly is racing off in the middle of dinner to go kill this kid because Chip has mentioned something about Scotty. And she's like, I gotta go, I gotta leave. Turns out she has actually gone to kill Betty Sterner and Ralph instead. And so the family, of course, has their suspicions at this point. So they drive off thinking that their mom is there to kill Scotty, but it's all sort of a mix-up. And they realize, maybe mom's not so bad. But the next day they wake up and they go to church and things are different.
Well, the reason I want to bring that up is it has one of my favorite, again, I should have the editor pulled up, and I know you probably will in a second. The editing of this movie is so great. And this sequence where Beverly is revealed in the closet holding the scissors and then stabs the wife, and she's screaming, cut to her husband yawning while eating some dessert, cut to Scotty masturbating and orgasming. And it's so great. It's the rhythm of the movie is on fire pretty much all the way throughout.
Yeah, this is actually edited by two women, Janice Hampton and Erica Higgins. So there you have it. The turning point of the movie is after this. Like they go to church the next day, and when they do, they're tailed by like a shitload of cop cars. I forget exactly how many it was, but this point like reveals the movie to be sort of a complete and utter dream. It is not really at all trying to represent how criminal investigations happen or anything like that. They actually name Beverly as a suspect on the radio while they're driving to church. For whatever reason, the cops don't arrest them, and they actually let them go to church.
Well, they're waiting to get like fingerprints back.
Yeah.
On the scissors, and once they get the match, they can clear. Because even the dispatcher is like, the match fits. Nail the bitch, boys. But I mean, I think, like you're saying, yes, this is obviously not reflective of real life, but I think this is spoofing that kind of heightened true crime hysteria that falls into these fictionalized takes on real crimes. Like they have to be heightened. They have to be much more melodramatic and cinematic than the actual events.
Right. And really it's ignoring reality for what works well in the scene, even if it's a total a dream, a complete lack of logic. It's just trying to be entertaining, and it's incessantly entertaining. That scene, of course, the preacher at the priest at the church is, talking about capital punishment. He's like, capital punishment is already the law in the state of Maryland, so let's just do it. And then one of the weird John Waters gross out moments happens where Kathleen Turner's character sneezes and blows a big booger into the face of a baby.
Well, because everybody in the church is on edge and hubba-bubbing when she walks in, because they all is like, oh, she's the killer, blah, blah, blah. And so the whole congregation is tense. So when she sneezes, everybody freaks out and runs and, thinks something horrible's happening.
Right.
And that's when the police eventually No, I think that's when
there's a chase.
That's right. She's chasing Scotty, and that's when she chases him to the club with a delightful cameo from the band L7, but they're not as L7. What's the band they decided to perform as, Travis?
Well, you're in the club, right? So it's this sort of punk band. It's an all-female punk band. The lighting is very red and magenta, and the camera's sort of pushing in through the crowd. And then you see the faces of the performers on the stage, and you're like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." It's kind of like a plum tree kind of vibe. And then the camera moves down, and eventually we see the drum head on the front of the bass drum, and it says "Camel Lips."
Which then we cut to.
We then cut to the front of these women's pants, in which there are exaggerated, like, camel toes literally sewn into their pants. It is one of the strangest gags. And it's another one of these things where, like, I may have had to pause the movie because I was laughing too hard. It's like, what? It comes out of nowhere.
I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, John Waters has an animated sensibility to his comedy. And I don't just mean that motion-wise. I mean that literally in kind of anything can go if it makes for a good laugh.
It's anarchic. It's totally anarchic in some ways.
I feel like it's a gag that in a lesser movie would break the spine of the movie's verisimilitude. Like, you'd be like, where did this come from? This feels way out of left field for the kind of comedy I was watching.
We already know that the movie is like a dream, though, because it sort of violated those rules of what we consider to be like a believable reality, or, you know, something that upholds a suspension of disbelief and being real enough. The movie's already broken those rules.
For sure. And I mentioned to you, like that camel lips gag is something that I could see in like a Fairley Brothers movie or one of those, you know, post something about Mary gross out comedies, and it just falls so flat and doesn't work. And I think I said to you, like, John Waters can take what would be a weak, non-working joke from something like a Fairley Brothers movie and get a huge laugh out of it.
He's definitely practiced at spinning straw into gold. Because that sort of humor is a little bit incongruous with what's been going on, like, because they take us out of the suburbs and actually into Baltimore proper for that scene, you know, we get a little bit of something that's not suburban, and that's camel lips. But it's sort of it's sort of in line with you know, Beverly's use of the word pussy and things like that to freak other people out, you know, specifically Dottie Henkel.
And again, Beverly is not a square. That's what I like. And that's, again, that would, I think, break the character. She ends up like bopping along to L7 of all bands.
Right.
Like,
she likes Charlie Manson. She likes, you know, the Wizard of Gore. She likes L7. And this is where she's ultimately arrested. The cops haul her in. And at this
after
point
she
in the movie,
flames Scotty, which is...
Oh, yeah. She does light Scotty on fire on stage, which is pretty spectacular. And then the movie jumps ahead 5 months.
And this is when we enter the necessary courtroom element of these kind of true crime stories. And, you know, we recently talked about My Cousin Vinny, because it was the first time I saw it and how effective that was in its third act courtroom stuff. Mm-hmm. This is the same kind of effectiveness on a totally different wavelength. And again, showcases just how brilliant of a writer John Waters is, because he's like, I hope you haven't just been looking at this at a surface value and just giggling along, because I've been building up to this moment, and I'm going to make every single character and every single big thing pay off in this sequence.
Well, we get to see at this point just how sort of hyper competent Beverly Sutphin is. You know, we know she's a smart character. She is driven to do horrible things, but at this point we actually start to question, is she doing horrible things for the right reasons? Because the movie reveals a little bit of its crazier side when her defense attorney makes his opening statement to the jury, and she interrupts him, sort of, clears her throat and interrupts him during his opening statement when she sees that the juror played by Patty Hearst is wearing white shoes after Labor Day.
Well, this is such a... I wish this would have come out like post OJ, because that was such a thing of him like writing notes to his lawyers and making a big show of it. And that reveal of like, she's wearing white on Labor Day.
Well, I love how it's a really fucking funny joke. I love how when her defense attorney is making his opening statements, he then sees the note, and then he completely changes his opening statement midstream and goes, "My client is insane."
Like, you cannot, yeah, she should not be charged because of, for reasons of insanity. And then Beverly decides to, of course, represent herself. And
that's the Ted Bundy part.
Yes, of course. But I think, like you're talking about with hyper competency, that is another part of the commentary. Like, to be the perfect mom, you have to be a Beverly Sutphin.
Yeah.
That's why it's crazy.
Right. And he's basically saying that the whole system of this is crazy and totally wrong. Which I agree with. This is his big suburban satire. And while sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to parse exactly what he's trying to say, because John Waters doesn't necessarily believe in easily cut heroes and villains. He definitely talks about villains in his films being specific kinds of people. But when you think about the kinds of people that piss John Waters off and the kind of people that he likes to make fun of, he talks about often like smart liberal censors are some of the people that piss me off the most, because that tends to exhibit this sort of pearl clutching. And then he also likes to make fun of conservative sort of prudishness.
One of my favorite little gags that doesn't really go, it doesn't get like a close-up or anything, but is a great bit of that commentary, is his belief of politics will only go one way until something very specific is happening to you.
Right. Because
Sam Waterston, Mr. Sutphin, is, throughout the movie, we keep hearing him be very pro-death penalty. And as soon as his wife is up, for the charges of murder and is potentially going to get the death penalty, we see him with a button, with the no sign, like no gas chamber. He's reading all these things about, like, I can't remember the book he's reading in court, but it's something about, like public justice and the death penalty and things like that. And immediately his stance has changed.
Right. And this is basically his commentary about the only time people get it is when it happens to them. And it's really about a lack of practicing empathy.
Right.
I hear stories all the time, and stories I can personally relate to, where it's like parents who have been rather conservative, their kid comes out of the closet and then they have a change of heart. And then I've seen other, this sort of inverse of that, very liberal parents, very accepting of gay people. And then their kid comes out of the closet and they freak. And it's all about, as soon as it happens to you, this exposes some sort of deeply rooted ideal, whether it's like if you have parents who are very pro-life and then suddenly their daughter gets pregnant and, it's like, well, you taught her abstinence-only education. What did you expect to happen? And then they have to consider getting their daughter an abortion. This is the kind of stuff Waters is talking about in the film.
I mean, it's not talking about abortion, but I
know,
get
but it's talking about social stances and how they shift based on circumstance.
Right. And what I love is that even though her family knows she's crazy, knows she's done these things, they are in this wonderful position of, well, we want her to be released because we love her, but we are totally whacked out by her. Her kids are selling Serial Mom merchandise outside the courtroom.
They sold her rights, for the story.
Oh, the great moment when Matthew Lillard gets punched out by some family member. It's like, your mom murdered my brother. And he's like, oh, come on, man. Like, you need to get over that or something. And he's like, we're already trying to sell this. It's like, who do you think could play you in the movie? Because I think he says, it's like, Suzanne Summers is going to play her. And then the family member's like, Suzanne Summers?
Yeah. as soon as they, people see dollar signs in their eyes, they go, ooh, we can turn this kind of tragedy into a spectacle.
Well, money and fame and all this. And when Suzanne Summers shows up and she's immediately like, I think she's totally innocent and being railroaded by a corrupt system and all this. It's wonderful commentary about this weird, perverse hero worship we have of serial killers. As much as we like to detest them, they are deified in a way. And Waters is so aware of that.
Yeah, it was one thing that our last week's movie kind of oddly sidestepped a little bit. It tried to not deify Charlie Manson. And it did so by not really featuring him in the film and not really dealing with him as an individual, which I think was kind of smartly done. But here, it definitely wants to talk about the sort of cult of personality that develops around a person like Beverly Sutphin when, you know, she's put on trial. And the trial is definitely a circus. It's definitely that circus atmosphere of a highly publicized trial.
And I mean, we're getting to the end of our time here, and we can't. There's so many funny things that happen during this trial.
The callback to the guy writing the graffiti on the fucking bathroom stall wall.
Well, in this, when he's called as a witness, they have to pull him out of the bathroom, and he's writing, "I sniffed jury's underpants in the stall."
Again, which is a stupid, like, Farrelly Brothers movie joke that becomes way more hilarious in this movie because of what we saw earlier.
Yeah, it's smart setup and payoff, and it's really funny. Beverly getting him to change his testimony by doing the, like, you know, leg.
Well, she's spreading her legs under the fucking
thigh,
table.
Yeah, she's doing like a thigh master. It's so ridiculously over the top. The way that she deconstructs the police using, like, oh, we found all this evidence of these horrible, you know, murder books that she got, and you see the trash men in the audience, and they've pulled up trash from the detective's house, and it's a magazine called
Chicks with Dicks.
And everybody's like, oh, and he's like, well, and she's like, you shouldn't judge people by what they read. And I'm like, yeah, Beverly, like, this is totally twisted, and you should be convicted of these crimes, but I'm so on your side.
Yeah, no, this section of the film is, of course, filled with more great stuff, just like earlier. And the end of the film is definitely kind of a strange commentary. Like, she kills Patty Hearst.
Well,
and that's really the button on the end of the film.
And the exchange there where she's like, you know, you're wearing white after Labor Day. And Patty Hearst is like, because Patty Hearst was a juror, and immediately before that, she's getting interviewed like, I knew she was innocent, and I believed her, and I'm so glad we did the right thing. And she's immediately killed by Beverly. And she's just going, you know, you wore white after Labor Day. And Patty Hearst is like, no, fashion has changed. And Beverly's like, no, it hasn't.
Right. It's another example of her sort of stuck in the 50s mentality, which is, a callback to the conservatism of the era.
Well, and then the final moment of the movie is her getting, you know, her and Suzanne Summers getting hounded for press photos. And Beverly is freaking out, like, I don't want to take this picture. I don't want to take this picture. And we're like, well, why? Like, does she just want to get out of there? But of course, the revelation when she yells just, Suzanne Summers, this is my bad side. Like, that's why. And then we hear a scream from somebody discovering Patty Hearst's body. The wonderful look Kathleen Turner gives to Suzanne Summers saying, like, yeah, you know, I did that. And then fade to black.
Yep. I love, you know, the ultimate thing that I love about this performance, you know, by Kathleen Turner as Beverly Sutphin is this idea of performative goodness. You know, there is definitely a sense that what Beverly is doing is performative. You know, of course, it's motivated by the fact that she wants to be a good mom for her children, but there's also this fact that she wants to be seen doing good things. It's not really all that important, I guess, for her to recycle, but it's important to be seen recycling. You know, this is a sort of keeping up with the Joneses mentality that she has. And this comes back again where she's like, you know, I have to be, you know, photographed on my good side. It's all about that performative nature of this, of all this.
For sure. And I think Beverly 100% believes in everything that she kills people for. Like, she believes in recycling, and she gives a big speech about it. And she believes in all the things she's doing, but I think it's that kind of sociopathic way of, like, you have to put on this specific facade because that is what is expected of you. And obviously this is taken to such a comical extreme. And again, I just can't say enough good about Turner pulling this off. It really is like,
is it her best performance?
Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to dig deeper into, you know, more of her filmography, but it's gotta be up there. I would say Serial Mom is worth watching just for Kathleen Turner, but it is so much more than that. It's such a well executed script. It's got, like I said, genuine great editing. it's not a super flashy film in the direction a whole bunch, but it's smart and it's fun and it knows when to pick its battles.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. What does it say about scary parents, though?
We'll looking at this as part of our theme month, I think that something that we'll see as we go along is even good parents have their bad side. And that's the thing is when we get to some other movies, I think it will be the case like, oh, this is not a good parent. They just have the veneer of one. But Beverly is a good mom. Like, that's what's so wonderful about the movie. But it's important to remember that even good people have their bad side, to put it lightly, but also that good parents are working so hard to be good parents. It's incredibly stressful.
Right. I mean, they're already working so hard just to keep the fucking wheels on the bus, so to speak. So to do that and be really good at it is really going above and beyond. I'm sure it takes a tremendous amount of effort. I don't know. I'm not a parent. But one of the things that really struck me about this is that it talks about just how fiercely supportive and fiercely protective Beverly is of her own children. When that asshole Carl breaks, her daughter's heart, she says, "I wish somebody would kill that guy." And of course, Beverly's like, "I could do that." She thinks to herself,
I'm gonna
I
do
could,
that.
I could do that, and she does end up doing it. That ferocity is frightening, I think.
And her daughter straight up says, like, "I didn't mean that." And then what does Beverly say? Like, "Well, you should mean the things you say."
Right.
And that's the thing is, like, Beverly's not a fake person.
Well, there are aspects of her that are a veneer or that are performative.
But she is, I think, true to herself. That's what's so important is, like, she couldn't, to the point where she can't abide somebody, breaking her daughter's heart or not rewinding a videotape.
Right.
And as far as like being afraid of your parents, it's not just the ones who are already, noticeably scary. It's also like if your parents are too good, then there's probably something else going on under the surface that they're either purposely not showing you or you're just not seeing.
Right. Well, and, parents are supposed to be role models, but John Waters, I think, clearly has a problem with people who present themselves as moral paragons, because every moral paragon is a hypocrite.
Yes. And as much as Beverly has her strict morals, the only way to enforce that is to murder. And that would seem in direct violation of everything that she's apparently wholesome and good about. But that's the comedy. So, yeah, man, just talking about this, I want to watch this movie again.
It's really, really funny. I'm sure you and I would have an absolute blast sitting down and watching this together and cracking open a bottle of wine or something. It's a good time. And I feel bad for sleeping on it for so long. Don't sleep on this one.
No, there's a good collector's edition by Scream Factory out. So might have to be picking that up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go to the shelf where we pick a movie to act as a good complement or substitute for our main feature. And as always, we want to encourage you, loyal listeners, to go to genrevision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks. We love hearing your shelf picks. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Serial Mom?
I'm going to pull off another John Waters film. This is Cecil B. Demented, and Melanie Griffith's central performance in the film is, of course, great. And I don't know if it's of the kind of caliber that Kathleen Turner delivers in Serial Mom, but it definitely provides a big anchor for that film to work. Cecil B. Demented is John Waters' ode to sort of guerrilla filmmaking and his lampooning of people who are really, really serious about indie film. In the film, there is a cult run by Stephen Dorff's character. They're kind of almost like a terrorist group who commit acts of guerrilla filmmaking, but they abduct Melanie Griffith's character, who is this big movie star, and her acting career has sort of not necessarily taken a dump, but like the quality of her acting isn't quite what it has been, and she's not really as passionate about film as she once was. But as she's abducted by this crew of renegade filmmakers, she starts to find her passion again. It's a pretty funny movie that does a great job of sort of pointing in all directions with its satire, and it's never punching improperly in any direction. It's really funny, but you have to, have a little bit more knowledge of indie film. They make jokes about Kenneth Anger. It's like, all right, a little bit of a deeper cut than something like Serial Mom. But if you like Serial Mom and if you like indie movies, you'll probably like Cecil B. Demented.
Well, yeah, I think to add to that a little bit, something that we didn't mention in the main part is that John Waters has said that he never lampoons or parodies things that he doesn't like. Anything that he made fun of was a genre or something that he loved. And I think that's so important, and why, as horrific as his movies can get in terms of their material, they never feel mean. Like, there is a heart and a warmth to his filmography. And I think that's key. And I definitely think that's presented in Cecil B. Demented. I'm surprised. I thought you were going to pick Addams Family Values, which you had mentioned.
Yeah, I had mentioned Addams Family Values, which is another really good suburban satire, equally pointed and, of course, very, very good. I was also reminded of Clerks by Serial Mom, and that it's got a very, very strong sense of place. There is a video store location, and there is definitely talk about like video rental and movie culture. Like, you can tell when you watch Serial Mom that it was made by somebody who really likes to geek out about movies.
Well, I wanted to find kind of the male counterpart to Serial Mom's particular brand of satire. And if you want a movie that has a lead character who has a strict moral code and wants to impose that moral code on society, oftentimes to horrific ends, but is also a pretty funny movie, you should check out James Gunn's Super. This is a movie that I'm surprised it's kind of stayed under the radar for a while. It stars Rainn Wilson, Ellen Page, I think Liv Tyler's in it, Kevin Bacon.
Liv Tyler is in it as the ex-romantic interest of Rainn Wilson's character.
Yes.
Kevin Bacon's the villain.
Yes, but it's about Rainn Wilson plays this very schlubby guy who immediately starts off with this just head over heels romance with Liv Tyler, and then he sees that she's taken away from him. And he's somebody who can't abide people doing things like cutting in line at the movie theater, and other, crime and stuff like that as he views it. So he decides to become a superhero, but he's not like a superhero nerd. That's Ellen Page's character. She's a comic nerd and is kind of educating him on what he has to do to become a vigilante superhero. And it is a dark, bizarre, crazy satire of a movie. Rainn Wilson's character is also devoutly Christian.
Yeah, that stuff with Nathan Fillion's character is pretty weird in that Christian stuff.
Yeah, well, he watches this Christian superhero show that kind of tells him his morals. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating because it's another character where it's this, if this is in real life, obviously this person is a monster and repulsive, and I would feel very little sympathy for them. But James Gunn is really good at turning up the ridiculousness and turning this character, I think his name is Frank, into somebody that I wanted to follow his journey. And by the end of the movie, I was kind of in love with, in the way I was in love with Beverly Sutphin.
I blind bought Super when it hit Blu-ray, and holy shit, did that movie weird me out. I haven't seen it since.
Yeah, I don't know. I figured it would get more and more profile after James Gunn, got on that Marvel train, but I think it stayed kind of buried. And I think it's examining certain male insecurities and male anger towards society in a way that Serial Mom is doing it from a very stereotypical 50s supermom way.
Yeah.
So I think they would make a good pairing. Serial Mom is definitely the first runner. The fun, yay, this is goofy and we like this and yada yada. Super runs darker and it gets more directly dramatic.
You can say that. Yeah, some heavy shit does go down.
Yes. So I've always had a soft spot for that movie, but as wacky as it is a tough watch. especially by the third act. So, but I think they make a good pairing. So Super by James Gunn. Go check it out. Let's do some currently consuming.
Nom, 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate recently?
I'm only going to talk about one thing, and that is something I watched on YouTube recently that it just brightened my day. One of my favorite channels on YouTube is the channel from Bon Appetit magazine. They have an extraordinarily popular channel, and for good reason. Their staff in their test kitchen is extraordinarily good on camera. They have several test cooks and, test kitchen managers that just do so well in front of the camera. They're really, really funny. They have such distinct personalities. They cook amazing food. And then, of course, the video crew that works for them, the people that shoot and the people that edit, do tremendous work. One of the long-running series that they have on that Bon Appetit channel is something called It's Alive, which is all about naturally fermented foods. And this has become one of the more popular things because the host of the show, a guy named Brad Leone, is just, he's just camera sugar. The camera absolutely loves him. People love watching him. He's extraordinarily funny and silly, but also makes really, really cool food, and that's very admirable. So there was a saga recently where they did 3 episodes about making sourdough donuts. Donuts are usually come in 2 varieties. That's a cake donut, which is leavened chemically with like baking powder and baking soda. And then there's yeast donuts, which are, leavened with yeast. But sourdough would be a natural fermentation of bacteria, which cause that sour flavor in the dough. And they also cause the expansion of gas bubbles in the dough to leaven it. And the 3-episode stretch they do on this just pretty much relies entirely on the strength of the hosts to be engaging and funny because they keep fucking the recipe up. It is pretty delightful. I haven't watched a whole lot else. I did watch Hellboy 2019, but that's not worth talking about.
Yeah, and I talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that in Extended Currently Consuming. But if you want to watch something way better than Hellboy 2019, go to the Bon Appetit channel on youtube.com.
Well, on my end, I watched a 6-episode documentary series called Dark Side of the Ring. Each episode deals with a different kind of tragic or I won't say awful, but just some very the premise is in the title. And the first 2 episodes were things that I was familiar with. The first one being about Macho Man Randy Savage and his real life wife, who played the character of his manager, Miss Elizabeth. And it's a fascinating exploration of how wrestling and real life, especially back then, kind of mixed and was weird. Like, it's amazing that she played his manager on television and they were married in real life for years. But then years later, like, they had kind of, started to have a rocky patch, but then they decided to get back together and he married her as her character on TV. And people thought it was like a totally real, they're really getting married for the first time. It ends on a good, like, most of the episodes for the most part end at a place where it's like, look, we clearly respect wrestling. The series is directed by Jason Eisner, who did Hobo with a Shotgun and some really, really good short films like Treevenge and One Last Dive.
Yeah, Treevenge is really fun.
Yeah, One Last Dive is great. Like, I think it's like a minute or something. And it's clear they have a super deep love of wrestling. The second episode is about the Montreal screw job, which is an infamous moment where a wrestler, Bret the Hitman Hart, was kind of screwed over during a match. It's a whole thing. People who know it, but I found this series to be so fascinating because it is, especially the last 4 episodes, which were all characters and people I had no knowledge of. You would think like the big ones would be like, oh yeah, it's the stuff I know. It's the things that I'm, already bought into. But it was the later episodes that really kind of sucked me in because there's, a wrestler who was probably murdered and nobody knows. Like, nobody knows what the actual, if it was an overdose, if it was suicide, if it was probably murder. All kinds of things like this. There's an outright murder that people know happened in one of the episodes of this wrestler, Bruiser Brody. down in Puerto Rico. And it's crazy. Like it is an insane look and a candid look at the history of wrestling. While still, like, I thought it was going to be a big takedown series, that it was going to be kind of a negative, like, look at this, like, look how horrible wrestling is. But it's so clear that they just want to portray, like, this is what really happened. This is how crazy this industry is behind the scenes. It's crazier than anything you'll ever see in actual matches, but still comes around to being like, we care about wrestling. And part of that is accepting all facets of wrestling's history, which have been kept so secretive. It's great. It's 6 episodes. It's a Viceland series, and I know they just got picked up for season 2, so I'm excited to see what else they'll do. So if that has any interest to y'all out there listening, I highly recommend it. So let's end things with our
comment of the week.
We did get a shelf pick from loyal listener JT Kennel, whose shelf pick was The Nice Guys, which is very appropriate and is also kind of becoming more and more like a minor great movie.
Yeah, I would agree. By the way, that shelf pick is for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so that's the one he recommended to pair with that. You just said shelf picks.
Oh, right. The shelf pick is from last week's episode on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And we can't really talk about the comments that we got because they were really, really good, but they're also incredibly spoilery. And we weren't going to spoil Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in this episode in case anybody listening hasn't seen it. But if you have seen it, I highly recommend going to the post on genrevision.com for it and reading the conversation that we had with some listeners and their viewpoints on the movie, because it's been really great. This is one of the things I love about you guys, is that we get to talk about movies in a very civil space, you know, that we are respecting each other's opinions and perspectives, and it's never, no, you're absolutely wrong and fuck you for feeling that way. I love talking with you guys about this stuff. It's part of the reason we keep doing the show. So I'm sad that we can't feature those comments on this episode because they're really good, but definitely go read them if you check them out. And thank you for the shelf pick, JT Kennel. Go watch The Nice Guys. It's a great movie. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Next week, we're going to continue Scary Parents Month, Scarens, with The Stepfather. The original The Stepfather, I should say. Maybe we should have done a versus or something, or a double feature with the remake, but no, because there's only one The Stepfather. That's the one we're going to see. And I think this is the first time for you seeing it, Travis?
That'd be correct, yep.
Yeah, so we'll have a fresh perspective. And it's a movie I've seen quite a few times, so I'm interested to hear your first take on it. But that's going to wrap it up. I just want to go watch Serial Mom again. It was so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you in that I got to save up for that Scream Factory one. That is definitely on the must-buy list. That along with the upcoming Blob Special Edition.
Yeah, so there you go. As always, we want to thank you all so much for listening. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.
You know I hate the brown word.